And yes, we are back. We are the Coalition. Live on AM 630, 99.7 WPRO. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And CoalitionRadio.us, where you can find all of our past shows. And in the past few weeks, we've talked with the folks from Clean RI. And you're going to hear a lot about them on Coalition Radio in the coming weeks as they take on the ultimate challenge, if you will, from Mordor, Halitosis Hall, our General Assembly. That is an attempt to restore an ethics commission with teeth, if you will, to the Rhode Island political landscape. But joining me live on the radio right now is, if you will, the Obi-Wan of Rhode Island independent media, a very successful candidate for lieutenant governor for the great state of Rhode Island, garnering over 10,000 votes as the first statewide libertarian candidate here in Rhode Island. Someone who could be found routinely on rifreeradio.org, Rhode Island's leading independent radio station, broadcasting political talk and thought, as well as the best indie music. I think everything from rockabilly to psychobilly to just good old rock and roll. I've, of course, got Tony Jones on the line. Tony, welcome back to the Coalition.
Oh, this is the Coalition. I thought it was the Mutual Fund show.
I resemble that remark.
Hey, Pat, do me a favor. You got to spring for a new intro, man. Dave's not here.
He's here in spirit.
He's not leaving Woney.
He's here in spirit. We continue to hope. Our lonely eyes turn towards Woonsocket.
I think you should look for a new co-host for exactly nights like this. I don't know anybody who would fit that bill almost perfectly. Hey, I'm still recovering from the time that we had at the Fat Squirrel last night.
It was quite the party, wasn't it?
That was a blast. Providence was a madhouse. It's Providence is returned to its heyday for just everything that was going on with the basketball and water fire, and of course our meetup. Providence was the old Providence last night.
It felt like all of a sudden you looked outside, you thought it was 2006 again.
I remember one night when we had left our New Year's Eve broadcast, and Providence was a ghost town on New Year's Eve, and there's a small revival we're seeing in the city, which is, as a fan of nightlife that I am, it's great to see.
Right, exactly. And for those folks who weren't able to make it, we do have an event coming up April 1st for the first live national broadcast of Libertarian presidential candidates, Mr. Gary Johnson, who we're going to talk about in just a second, and Austin Peterson, and, of course, the fascinating John McAfee will be out from the bunker. Not sure if he's going to check all his weapons at the door, but one of the more, I'll take, eclectic political figures to join the political landscape. If you watch him closely, in a lot of ways, I think he out-Trumps Trump.
It's a good thing that there's not a drug test required to participate in the debate.
I think there's a drug test. If you don't pass it, you're not allowed in the debate. But Tony, you've been asked to head up the Gary Johnson campaign for 2016. Now, folks who may not be familiar with Gary Johnson, he was the Libertarian Party leader, if you will, in 2012. He got almost 1.3 million Americans to vote for a Libertarian Party president, a record. We just essentially breached the 1% mark. And clearly the message began to resonate in 2012. Of course, going forward, the Libertarian National Convention is in 2016. The radical sea change, though, is we're watching, if you will, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party candidacies go into a meltdown, and people are on a daily basis across talk radio land, across the fruited plain, are saying, if only we could have someone who was, experienced in a steady-handed government, yet at the same time had a fundamental level of respect for both the Constitution and our own personal freedoms. And what do you say to that, Tony Jones?
Well, I mean, if it shakes out to be what it looks like it's going to shake out to be, which is Trump versus Clinton, Gary is the most qualified candidate. Two-time past governor, small business guy, kind of built up an empire, starting off with just him in a truck and doing a handyman thing. He built that up into a huge business. He has executive experience. He's been CEOs of companies, but he's also led. I think libertarians sometimes get a bad rap on if they're elected, are they going to be able to lead? Gary's a guy with a track record. So I think I've mentioned to you personally, I have folks contacting me every day who have not paid attention to politics in the past or are excited about Gary Johnson. Now, he is the front runner for the Libertarian nomination. There will be a convention in May, and we'll see how that shakes out. But it pretty much looks like it's going to be Gary.
Now, what's fascinating is that flashback to 2012, and it seems so many years ago, Gary Johnson ran as a Republican. Now, again, two-term governor of New Mexico. They called him Governor Veto because he liberally exercised the line item veto in New Mexico.
Right. Yeah.
Took one of the poorest states in the nation and left them literally with $1 billion surplus. Now, the Republicans chose to essentially ignore him in the 2012 run-up. Is it fair to say the Republicans probably wish they had him now?
Well, and the thing is, going into 2012, it wasn't a fluke campaign. Gary traveled all around as a Republican. He went to New Hampshire. He went through Iowa, and he really laid the groundwork for a Republican campaign. It looked like it was going to be, he had a fair amount of support within the Republican Party. But how he was treated by the Republican elders was how he turned towards running as a Libertarian very successfully here in Rhode Island. In 2008, Bob Barr ran. He was on the ballot for president. He got 0.3%, and Gary got 1% in 2012. So, as you know, and I'm sure a lot of listeners know, if the Libertarian Party can get 5% or more, we will become an officially recognized state party.
Right.
So we're looking towards the 5%, again, especially if it comes out to be Clinton versus Trump. There's people out there who are either just going to set out the election altogether, or hopefully we can get them to turn out for Gary Johnson or whoever the Libertarian nominee is going to be, because that's where we've kind of looked at the top-down, bottom-up approach where, we're hoping to run Gary as the presidential candidate, but we're looking at smaller foundation candidates, town council, dog catcher,
right,
school committee, really winnable races. So that'll be the focus, with kind of having Gary as the executive officer. And if he earns that 5%, then going into 2017, that's when we can really start to build the groundwork for the local party.
Now, one of the things that we discuss routinely is the fact that most people don't realize it, but they are libertarians, aren't they?
Yeah, that's when I talk to folks, especially younger folks, millennials and younger, they're kind of still politically homeless. They don't identify with Republicans. They don't identify with conservatism. They don't really identify with the quote-unquote Democrats, but they're fiscally conservative, and for the most part, they're socially cool. And that's when I say, you may not have known it, but you're a libertarian.
Right. I mean, and when we talk about socially cool, our prior call-in talked about cafeteria politics. We believe as libertarians, in full disclosure, I am the chairman of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party. We believe in liberty. Now, that's kind of been an abused word for the last generation or so, because lots of people have their own versions of liberty. And when we talk about cafeteria conservatism, we talk about liberty for me, but not for thee, if you will. The notion that the lifestyle that I envision for my family, and whether it be certain religious values that are imbued upon it, but people project on their own version of liberty, yet at the same time the established political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, are loath to consider alternative lifestyles. Now, that can be a quote-unquote alternative lifestyle, for example, like the marriage equality movement, which, by the way, and for the record, Gary Johnson was a lifetime Libertarian member from a generation ago. Libertarians supported marriage equality since the 70s. Carla Howe, when she ran for Senate and for governor up in Massachusetts, was the first one to evoke that in New England as an issue when it comes to other quote-unquote alternative lifestyles. And so, by the way, a lifestyle is only alternative if it isn't the one that you decide to pursue. And so we talk about personal liberty. We have something called the NAP. And, Tony, why don't you explain the NAP to people?
The NAP is the non-aggression principle, which pretty much plays into where your freedom ends is kind of at the end of your arm, or when you commit aggression towards somebody else. Within that atmosphere of not being aggressive. That's how you should be able to live your life, as long as you're not interfering with anybody else's liberty.
Exactly. Now, there's a couple of knocks against libertarians. First of all, we're all said to be isolationists. We're not isolationists, are we? We believe in a strong defense, but a defense when it's appropriate. And how well has the neoconservative foreign policy worked out well for the United States over this generation? Has it worked?
Well, especially when you look at the lobbyists in the military-industrial complex and how much pressure they put on Congress to keep these never-ending wars going for more contracts. I mean, when you have the Army telling you, we don't want this program, we're not going to use it, and they say, well, no, you can. We're going to build those anyway, and they're still going to get paid, and that's still going to move forward. It almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where we have to keep rolling into these wars to keep the whole system going. And yeah, I mean, I think that most libertarians you talk to are pro-defense as far as defending the country on the homeland. It's just kind of thinking before we head into non-ending foreign skirmishes.
Right. Now, our other discussion, there is, of course, the wasted vote argument. And I call the folks who strategically vote, I call that outcome-based voting, where folks are more interested in handicapping a race than voting their own personal beliefs. You know, if you cast aside the rhetoric, is it fair to say that the actions, the actual execution of governmental policy of the Democrats and the Republicans, are they dissimilar at all in reality?
Well, when you take it down to the micro level, too, when it comes to the wasted vote, there are very thin lines between Republicans and Democrats, especially here locally. We do have a coalition approach where, and we've talked about it, it's not really worth on the local level to have libertarians running against Republicans, running against moderates, running against independents. We've been willing to work with whoever, and we've been building up our contacts within the House of Representatives and the Senate, and I do it personally on the town level. But in Rhode Island, when it comes to wasted vote, the Democrat is going to win Rhode Island, no matter how you slice it.
Right.
So your chance to really make a difference is to help us get to that 5% by voting for Gary Johnson or whoever the nominee is, and helping us become an official state-recognized party, because that's when we can start to organize on the state level. That's when we qualify for checkoff contributions. That's when we can get matching funds. That's when we get a seat at the table for everything that happens at the Secretary of State's office. So if you're worried about wasting your vote, helping the Libertarians get that 5%, helping us become a recognized alternative party is a great way to make a difference going forward, looking back and saying, hey, I was part of the group that got those guys to become a state-recognized party, because that's when we can start to make a real difference.
Now, how do folks get in touch with you, Tony Jones, to help the Gary Johnson campaign and to help libertarians get a seat at the table?
Gary Johnson 2016, if you click on volunteer, they'll ask you for some information, and then we here on the state level get all that information. There's a Facebook group, RI for Gary Johnson. There's Gary Johnson Rhode Island Facebook page. Of course, the Libertarian Party, Libertarian Facebook group and Facebook page, and lpri.us. If you contact us through there, we'll get your information there, too. There's a lot of folks out there that are interested in the Gary Johnson campaign that aren't necessarily interested in the Libertarian Party. I get that as the state director, so if you want to keep those two separate, I don't have a problem with that. And also, like we talk about with Gary Johnson campaign and with the Libertarian Party, we have openings for all different. If you have an hour a week, or if you're retired, you have 40 hours a week. We have all different seats for all different asses, as the old saying goes. So we have something. We have something for you, no matter how much you'd like to be involved or how much you'd like to not be involved.
Excellent. And of course, Tony, where can we find your radio musings on a daily basis?
TonyJones.org, and I'm on Rhode Island Free Radio and a bunch of smaller stations throughout the country. So if you have time, basically, I'm spinning tunes somewhere.
It's a Tony Jones hour somewhere.
I drink a lot of coffee.
Well, again, Tony Jones, a former candidate for lieutenant governor, garnered over 10,000 votes for a Libertarian candidate, a record here in the state of Rhode Island. The Libertarian Revolution has become, so as we like to say, we're fiscally responsible, socially cool. Tony, let's tell them, be Libertarian with us, right?
That's right, LPR. I got 3% of the vote. I mean, all we need is 2 more with Gary Johnson or whoever the nominee becomes, and that's when we can really make some change here on the local level.
All right, super. Again, April 1st, venue to be announced, the first nationally televised debate for Libertarian partisan candidates live on Fox Business News. You'll hear about it more on this show. And, of course, like all of the Facebook pages.